The coffee was cold by the time my son-in-law walked through the front door. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table for 40 minutes, watching the steam fade off the mug, listening to the heater click on and off. Outside, the maple in the front yard was halfway through dropping its leaves, and the wind kept dragging them across the porch like somebody sweeping up after a party that had ended a long time ago. I'm 68. My name is Bennett Ashford. I worked 34 years as a structural engineer for a firm in Hartford, Connecticut. And when my wife, Jeanette, passed in the spring of 2022, I sold the firm shares, kept the house she and I built in 1987, and told myself I'd take it slow. Fishing, reading, maybe drive down to see my brother in the Carolinas now and then. Slow. That was the plan. That morning, the morning everything started to come apart, was supposed to be my retirement dinner. Not a real one. The real one was 3 years back. This was a makeup. My daughter Whitney had called the week before and said she wanted to throw something small. Just family. She wanted to do it right this time, she said, because Jeanette had still been sick during the original one, and nobody had really celebrated. I should have known something was off when she said do it right. Whitney doesn't say things like that. Whitney is a closer. Sales. She runs a regional cosmetics distribution outfit out of New Haven, and her sentences always sound like she's working a quota. But I'm her father, and a father wants to believe his daughter when she calls and says she's sorry it took her so long to plan a dinner for him. So when her husband Trent walked into my kitchen that morning 20 minutes later than he said he'd be there, with a garment bag slung over one arm and his phone pressed to his ear, I just nodded and pointed at the coffee pot. He waved me off. Held up a finger, walked into the living room, and lowered his voice. No, I told you. By tonight. Tonight. He'll be at the restaurant by 6. The house will be empty by 6:15. The heater clicked on. I heard about half of it. I want to tell you that I knew right then that some old engineer's instinct in me lit up, and I started running calculations. But it wasn't like that. What I felt was something stupider and slower. A small cold thing in the bottom of my stomach. The kind of thing you tell yourself is indigestion. The kind of thing that men my age talk themselves out of every day, because the alternative is too embarrassing to consider. I went back to my coffee. Trent came back into the kitchen, smiling. Sorry, Bennett. Work thing. You ready? Ready for what? Whitney wanted me to swing you by the dry cleaners, then we're meeting her at the restaurant. She got a new place out in Glastonbury. You're gonna love it. I looked at the garment bag. What's that? Your suit. From the cleaners. She picked it up Tuesday, and she wanted you to wear it tonight. The blue one Jeanette got you. I hadn't worn that suit since the funeral. I hadn't told anyone where it was. I hadn't even thought about it. How'd you get it from the cleaners? I said. He didn't blink. Whitney has the ticket. I nodded slowly. The cold thing in my stomach got a little colder. I want you to understand something about Whitney. She is 41 years old. She has been my daughter for 41 years. I changed her diapers. I taught her to drive a stick shift in the parking lot of the old Cawdor on Route 5. I paid for her wedding to her first husband, and then I paid for her divorce from her first husband, and then I paid the down payment on the house she lives in now with Trent. I'm not telling you this to make myself sound like a hero. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that when I say I trusted her, I mean I trusted her with the kind of trust that takes 41 years to build, and only one morning to start dismantling. I went upstairs and changed into the blue suit. It hung off my shoulders a little. I'd lost weight after Jeanette. The mirror in the bedroom still had her lipstick smudge on the corner from the last time she'd kissed her own reflection. The way she did before going out. A little ritual that made her laugh every single time. I hadn't cleaned it. I wasn't going to. When I came back down, Trent was on his phone again, in the hallway this time, by the front door. He didn't hear me on the stairs. I'd lived in this house for 38 years. I knew which boards creaked. The locksmith's already at the corner. Soon as you text me he's in the car, I'll send him up the driveway. Don't worry about the alarm. Whitney has the code. I stopped on the third step from the bottom. My hand was on the banister. I remember the feel of the wood. Jeanette's hand had been on that banister 10,000 times. I remember the grain of it under my palm, and I remember thinking very clearly, very calmly, they are stealing my house. Not asking, not borrowing. Stealing. From me. Today, while I was at dinner. The cold thing in my stomach went somewhere else. It went into my hands and into my jaw and into a place behind my eyes that I haven't felt since I was 22 years old in a bar fight outside a base in Texas. I made a decision in the half-second between that step and the next. I'm proud of it. It might be the smartest decision I've made in my life. I decided to play stupid. I came down the rest of the stairs, loud and slow, and Trent jumped a little and put the phone away and gave me that big son-in-law smile, the one that has too many teeth in it. Looking sharp, Bennett. Thanks, son. Hey, listen, I'm a little turned around this morning. I took my pill late. Did Whitney say where we're going? I forget. He looked at me. I watched his eyes. I want you to understand exactly what I saw in them. I saw a flicker of relief because the old man was foggy this morning, and a foggy old man is an easier mark. Glastonbury, Bennett. New place. Italian. We'll be there before you know it. Italian. We'll be there before you know it. Italian. Right. Did I take my keys? I patted my pockets, frowning. I can't remember if I'll drive, he said quickly. You leave him here. We'll come back after. You sure? I don't want to be a bother. Bennett. He clapped my shoulder. It's your night. I left my keys on the hook by the door. I left my phone too. I told him I'd grab it when we got back. I walked out of my own house in a suit that smelled like dry cleaning chemicals, with the man who was helping my daughter rob me. And I shut the door behind me and got into the passenger seat of his Audi, and I smiled at him the whole way down the driveway. Here's the thing they didn't know. 18 months ago, 6 months after Jeanette died, I had what my doctor called a cardiac event. Not a heart attack, something smaller. A warning. I was in the hospital for 2 nights, and on the second night, when I was sitting up at 3 in the morning with that bad coffee hospital feeling, I started thinking about what would happen to everything if the next one wasn't smaller. So I called a lawyer, not the family lawyer, the one Whitney knew. A new one. A woman named Adaeze Okwu, who'd been recommended to me by a colleague's widow, and who had handled exactly the kind of thing I was worried about, exactly the way I wanted it handled. I went to see her the week after I got out of the hospital. I sat in her office on a Tuesday afternoon, and I told her, very quietly, that I loved my daughter, and that I was afraid of what my daughter might become if I died with the wrong paperwork in place. Adaeze did not flinch. Adaeze said something I have not forgotten. She said, Mr. Ashford, the ones who love you don't need the paperwork. The ones who need the paperwork don't love you. We're going to make sure the paperwork loves you. We spent the next 4 months unwinding everything. The house was placed into a revocable living trust with me as the sole trustee, and a successor trustee who was not Whitney, not Trent, and not anyone they'd ever met. The financial accounts were retitled. The old durable power of attorney, the one Whitney had been listed on since 2019, was revoked, and a new one was issued to my brother Carter down in Asheville. My will was rewritten. My daughter was still in it. She was just not in charge of any of it. And the locks on the house, the locks Whitney had a key to, those got changed in February. I told her the old ones were sticking. I'd given her a new key. I'd given her a key to the side door. The side door has its own deadbolt. The side door has its own deadbolt. The side door has never opened the front door. Whitney had never noticed, because Whitney had not been to my house since Mother's Day, and on Mother's Day, I'd let her in through the front myself. She thought she had a key to my house. She had a key to my mudroom. The mudroom door, on the inside, has been bolted from the kitchen since 1991, after a raccoon got in through the dog door we used to have. she would have stood in that mudroom with her locksmith and her husband, and her husband, and her code for an alarm that was no longer on that account. And she would have realized slowly that she could not get any further into the house than the rubber boot tray. That was the plan I built 18 months ago, in case it was ever needed. I had hoped, the way you hope about a fire extinguisher, that I'd never need it. In the car, Trent was talking about a basketball game. I nodded. I asked him questions about the score. He answered. He kept checking his phone in the cup holder, and every time it lit up, his shoulder twitched. I watched his shoulder. I counted the twitches. By the time we hit the highway, he checked it 9 times. "You okay, son?" I said. "You seem jumpy. Long week. Whitney working you hard." He laughed. A short, tight laugh. Something like that. I looked out the window at the trees going by, all that red and yellow, and I thought about my daughter at her own dinner table the week before, telling me how much she missed me, telling me the family hadn't been the same since her mother died, telling me she wanted to do it right this time. And I thought about how she'd known exactly which suit to ask for. The restaurant was one of those places with a fake stone wall and a wood-fired pizza oven they wheel out for show. Whitney was already there, at a corner booth, in a green dress I didn't recognize, with her hair done the way she does it for client meetings. She stood up when she saw me. She came over and hugged me hard, both arms, and she said into my ear, "Happy retirement, Daddy?" And for a half second, just a half second, the part of me that is still her father almost broke. I held on a beat longer than she expected. Then I let go and I sat down across from her, and I let Trent slide in next to her, and I picked up the menu and I said, "Order whatever you want, sweetheart. Tonight's on me." She smiled. She glanced at Trent. Trent's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out under the table. I saw his thumb move. I saw the small, satisfied breath he took. I ordered the osso buco. It was excellent. I'm telling you this so you understand. I sat at that table for almost 2 hours with the 2 people who had spent God knows how many evenings planning to take my home from me, and I made small talk, and I asked Whitney about her business, and I told a story about her mother, a true one, about the first time Jeanette met her, the day we brought her home from the hospital. And I watched my daughter's face while I told it, and I watched her blink, and I watched her take a long sip of wine, and I knew with the absolute certainty of a man who has spent his career calculating load on beams, that she had stopped being able to look at me directly somewhere around the second course. People who do something terrible to someone they love cannot look at that person while they're doing it. The face won't let them. It's the one mercy God built into us, and it's not enough. But it's something. Around 8:15, Trent's phone went off again. He read the screen. His face did something. He got up. "Bennett, will you excuse me a minute? I gotta take this." "Course, son." He went outside. Through the front window, I watched him pacing on the sidewalk, his free hand on top of his head, then on the back of his neck, then on top of his head again. He was talking fast. He was talking with his shoulders. Whitney watched him too, then she turned back to me. Her smile was a different smile now. It was the smile she used to put on when she was a kid, and she'd done something and was waiting to see if I'd noticed yet. "Daddy," she said, "I have to tell you something." "Oh?" "Trent and we've been talking about the house, your house, and we want you to really hear us out on this. We think it might be time for you to think about something smaller, easier. Mom's been gone almost 3 years now, and that house is, Daddy, it's a lot of house. It's a lot of stairs. It's a lot of memory. We think you'd be happier somewhere, lighter. Lighter's this beautiful place in West Hartford. They have a courtyard. It's got a whole social calendar. I already toured it. I had them hold a unit. I want you to come look at it, Daddy. With an open mind. Will you do that? I want to be honest with you about what happened in my chest at that moment. It wasn't anger. The anger had cooled hours ago into something else. What I felt, sitting across from my daughter while she told me a fairy tale about a courtyard and a social calendar in a voice that was almost shaking, was grief. I was grieving her. I was grieving her right at the table. I was grieving the kid who used to ride on my shoulders at the state fair because that kid was gone, and the woman across from me had been wearing her face for I don't know how long. Honey, I said, that sounds like something we should talk about. As a family. Her eyes flicked. Yeah, exactly. Have Trent come back in. Let's all sit down. It'll be a minute. Work thing. I sipped my water. Whitney, can I ask you something? Of course, Daddy. Do you remember when you were 10, you took $20 out of my wallet to buy a Trapper Keeper at the school book fair? She froze. The smile slipped. You remember what I told you when you finally admitted it? Daddy, I told you that I wasn't mad about the money. I told you the money was nothing. I told you that the only thing in the whole world that mattered to me was that you and I never lied to each other. Do you remember what you said? She didn't answer. You said, I promise, Daddy. I'll never lie to you again as long as I live. You were 10. You were sitting on the back porch, in pajamas, with Coco. You meant it. I believed you. Daddy, I don't know what you're... I want you to think very carefully, I said, about what you say to me next. The door of the restaurant opened. Trent came back in. His face was the wrong color. He half jogged to the booth. He bent down and put his mouth right next to Whitney's ear, and I watched her face change while he whispered. And I thought, there it is. Whitney looked at me. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Something wrong? I asked. Bennett, Trent said, and his voice cracked on my name. Something happened at your house. The locksmith called the police. Your alarm. Bennett, what did you do? I set my napkin on the table. I folded it in half, and then in half again, and then I lined it up neatly with the edge. I didn't do anything tonight, son, I said. I did it 18 months ago. Whitney made a sound. It wasn't a word. Your old key opens the mudroom, I said to her. Not the kitchen. Your power of attorney was revoked in March of last year. The house has been in a trust since June. Your name was never on the trust. Carter's the successor trustee. The alarm account changed monitoring companies in April. Whoever you called for the code got a polite young man named Anthony who has very strict instructions about who's allowed to have it. The locksmith you sent over there is a real locksmith, by the way. I checked his license a month ago when you started asking me weird questions about my front door. He's about to be very embarrassed, and the police are going to release him because he didn't actually do anything wrong. The two of you, on the other hand, sent him there. With a story. And a key. To a house you don't own access to. And you did it from a restaurant in a different town while you were buying me dinner. I put my hands flat on the table. I made myself look at her. Sweetheart, I said. I love you. I have loved you since the second they put you in your mother's arms. I will love you on the day I die. And I am not going to let you do this to yourself. Not on my watch. Not in my name. Not with my house. She was crying, not the way she used to cry as a kid, where it was loud and theatrical and over in 5 minutes. This was a different kind. It was the kind that comes out of somebody who has just understood something about themselves that they're going to have to carry forever. Trent was sitting very still. His phone was face down on the table. He was looking at it like it was a snake. What are you going to do? Whitney whispered. I'm going to finish my coffee, I said. Then I'm going to call my lawyer. And I'm going to call the police. And I'm going to call my brother. And we are going to make some decisions about how this goes. I want you to understand that I have not decided yet how this goes. There is a version of this where you and I figure out how to live in the world together after tonight. There is a version where we don't. That's going to depend on the next thing you say to me. So think hard. She was shaking. She put her hands over her face. "Daddy," she said, "we're in trouble. We're in real trouble." I figured. Trent's business, there's people, they came to the office last month. "Daddy," they said they'd. "Whitney." I said her name gently. "I'm going to stop you, because I don't want you to tell me a story that's a lie wrapped around a real thing, which is what you do when you're scared. I want to know one thing, and I want the truth, and after that we can have the rest of the conversation slowly, okay?" She nodded, her hand still on her face. "Was tonight your idea or his?" She didn't answer for a long time. The restaurant noise went on around us, plates and laughter and somebody at the bar telling the same story twice. I waited. "Mine," she whispered. "It was mine. He owed people. I thought, Daddy, I thought you wouldn't even notice. I thought we'd put you somewhere nice and you wouldn't notice you sold the house your wife died in." She was crying so hard now she couldn't talk. "I noticed," I said. "I noticed 18 months ago. The day I came home from the hospital, I noticed. I looked around at everything your mother and I built, and I thought, who am I leaving this to? And I thought about you, sweetheart. And I thought about the way you'd been when your mother got sick. The way you stopped coming over. The way you started asking, very casually, about the will. The way Trent started showing up at Sunday dinner with questions about my retirement accounts. And I thought, please God, let me be wrong." I picked up my water. My hand was shaking. I didn't try to hide it. I prayed I was wrong, Whitney. I have prayed every single day for 18 months that I was wrong about my own daughter. Tonight, you proved I wasn't. And do you know what the worst part is? The worst part is, I'm relieved, because if you'd been the daughter I raised, I'd be sitting here right now letting you put me in a courtyard. Trent finally spoke. His voice was very small. "Bennett, sir, There are people, they're going to..." "Who?" "Some guys from New York. I borrowed against..." "How much?" "4,000. Thousand." "Yes, sir. And you thought my house was going to cover it?" He nodded. "How long do you have?" "Tomorrow." I almost laughed. I want you to know I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the size of it. The cheap size of it. $400,000. The house is worth $9. They were going to take everything I have ever built for less than half its value because they couldn't even rob me competently. I took a long breath. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "Tonight, you are going to drive me home, both of you. We are going to walk into my house through the front door, which I will open with my key, and we are going to sit in my living room with the lights on. I am going to call my brother. I am going to call my lawyer. And I am going to call a detective named Marisol Fontaine, who works elder fraud out of the Hartford field office, and who has been expecting a call from me since last March when I told her I was worried this might be coming." Whitney looked up. "You knew," she said. "I prepared," I said. "There's a difference. What's going to happen to us?" "I don't know yet. That depends on a lot of things, including the people Trent owes who are now my problem to figure out, because you made them my problem. It depends on whether you cooperate. It depends on whether you understand, really understand, what you tried to do. And it depends, sweetheart, on whether you can sit in that living room tonight and look me in the face and tell me the truth. All of it. Not the version that makes you the victim. Not the version where Trent made you do it. The truth." I paid the check. Trent tried to put his card down. I waved him off. I left a 40% tip because the waiter had been kind, and because I had decided, somewhere between the second course and dessert, that I was going to be a man my wife would have recognized for the rest of this night, no matter what the cost was. And a man my wife would have recognized tips well even when his world is ending. We drove back to my house in Trent's car. Nobody spoke. Whitney sat in the passenger seat with her forehead against the window. Trent drove the speed limit. The leaves blew across the road in the headlights, and I sat in the back, and I thought about Jeanette, and I told her in my head what was happening, the way I have done every night for almost 3 years, and I told her I was going to handle it, and I told her I was sorry I couldn't protect our daughter from the person our daughter had decided to become. The locksmith was gone by the time we got there. The police cruiser was still in the driveway, lights off. A young officer named Vega was on the porch, talking on his radio. He saw me, stood up straight, asked if I was Mr. Ashford, asked if I was the homeowner, asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at my daughter, who was standing on my front walk in a green dress in the cold, with her arms wrapped around herself and her makeup destroyed. "Not tonight," I said. "Tonight we're going to talk. Tomorrow I'll know." Officer Vega looked at me a long second. Then he nodded. He gave me his card. He told me his shift ended at 6 and to call him before then if I wanted him back. I unlocked my front door with my key, and I held it open, and my daughter walked through it, and my son-in-law walked through it, and I walked in last, and I shut it behind us. We sat in the living room for 4 hours. Some of what was said in that room is mine and Whitney's, and not for telling. Some of it I will tell you, because it matters. I learned that Trent's debt was to a man in Queens who runs a sports book and who had given Trent a line 18 months ago that Trent had spent on a cosmetic surgery clinic investment that turned out to be a fiction. I learned that Whitney had known about the debt for 9 months. I learned that the Courtyard place in West Hartford was real, and the unit was real, and that my daughter had paid the deposit on it with my granddaughter's college fund, which I did not know existed because she had opened it in my name without telling me, with a check from one of the joint accounts she'd had access to before I cleaned everything up. I learned that they had been planning tonight since June. I learned that my daughter, when she finally stopped lying, had a voice I hadn't heard since she was a teenager, small and thin and exhausted, and underneath it, somewhere, the kid I remembered. I called Carter at midnight. He drove up from Asheville the next morning. I called a Daisy at 7 a.m., and she was in my kitchen by 10 with a folder an inch thick and a yellow pad. I called Detective Fontaine, and she came at noon, and she was kind to my daughter, kinder than I would have been, and she explained the choices that were now on the table. In the end, I did press charges. I want to tell you the truth about this. I did it because Ades, who has done this work for 30 years, told me that the thing that finally makes people like Whitney face themselves is consequence, and that loving her enough to spare her consequence was the same as loving her enough to destroy her. I did it because Detective Fontaine told me, gently, that the man in Queens did not stop existing because we had a hard conversation in a living room. I did it because some part of me, the part that is still Jeanette's husband, would not have been able to look at her grave again if I had let our daughter walk away from this with nothing learned. Trent took a plea. He's serving 30 months in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. The man in Queens turned out to be a federal informant on an unrelated case, which meant Trent's debt, in a way none of us understood until Ades explained it, became a piece of someone else's prosecution, and the $400,000 stopped mattering to anyone but the IRS. Whitney pleaded down to attempted larceny and conspiracy. She got 18 months suspended, 2 years probation, and 400 hours of community service at a senior center in Bridgeport, where she has been, every Saturday and Sunday for the last 11 months, helping run a financial literacy program for retirees. A Daisy found the placement. Ade said, "If she's going to learn anything, let her learn it from people her father's age." The granddaughter, my granddaughter, Penelope, who is 9 and who did not know any of this was happening, comes to my house every other weekend. I'm her primary caregiver right now. Whitney sees her on Sundays, supervised at first by a court worker and now by me. And Penelope and I are figuring out, together, how to be the people she has left while her mother does the work of becoming somebody. Penelope can have back. It's hard. I won't pretend. I sit in this house some nights, in the chair I sat in with Jeanette for 35 years, And I look at the framed photograph of Whitney at 6 on the mantle, in the snow, her cheeks red, holding a cardinal feather she'd found in the yard, and I cry. I cry because the kid in the photograph is real, and the woman who tried to take this house from me is real. And I have not figured out yet how to hold both of them in the same chest. I'm not sure I ever will. But Penelope is asleep upstairs. Her nightlight is on. Tomorrow morning I'm going to make her pancakes. The way I made them for her mother, and the way her grandmother made them for me. And I'm going to drive her to her soccer game. And I'm going to clap when she scores and clap when she doesn't. And I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here in this house. The one Jeanette and I built. The one that is mine. The one I protected. The one that nobody, not even my own daughter, was allowed to take. I'm 68 years old. I am not done. The paperwork loves me. So does the kid upstairs. And on the worst nights, when the wind is dragging the leaves across the porch the way it was that morning, I remind myself of something Jeanette used to say, that I didn't fully understand until the night I sat across from our daughter in a green dress in a corner booth in Glastonbury. She used to say, "Bennett, the people who love you don't test the locks." She was right. She was always right. I've thought about that night 1,000 times since it happened. And I keep coming back to one thing. Whitney didn't become a person who would steal from her father overnight. Nobody does. She became that person in small steps over years. And every step was a choice. The choice to stop calling. The choice to ask about the will instead of about my health. The choice to listen to Trent's panic instead of telling him to face the men he owed. By the time she leaned across that booth and asked me to consider a courtyard in West Hartford, the woman doing the asking had already made 50 choices that brought her there. The dinner was just where the bill came due. That's the part I want anyone listening to understand. Causes have effects. The effects feel sudden, but the causes never are. If you raise a child and you teach her, the way I taught Whitney when she was 10, that lying to the people who love you is the worst thing you can do. And then you watch her start lying in small ways and you don't say anything because you don't want to fight, you are a cause. I'm not letting myself off the hook here. I should have said something 3 years before that dinner. 5 years. I didn't. I told myself it was her marriage, her business, her life. That was a small choice on my part, and it had effects too. The reason I survived that night is not because I'm clever. It's because 18 months earlier, sitting in a hospital bed at 3 in the morning, I made myself look at something I didn't want to look at. That's all wisdom is, in the end, the willingness to look at the thing you don't want to look at, and then do the boring, unglamorous work the looking tells you to do. A daisy didn't save my house. The 4 months of paperwork I did with her saved my house. The work saved me. The work always saves you. And the strength part, the part about getting through it, I want to be honest with you. I cried in this chair more nights than I didn't. That first month after the dinner, I missed Jeanette so badly I couldn't breathe sometimes. I sat with a photograph of Whitney at 6, and I grieved the woman she became and the father I might have been. But Penelope was upstairs, and a man who has a granddaughter upstairs does not get to lie down. He gets up. He makes the pancakes. He drives to the soccer game. He builds, with whatever time he has left, a place she can stand on when he's gone. That's the only job. The locks on the doors are the easy part. The locks on your character are what you actually leave behind.